One of the questions I get all the time is what happens after we die? There's so little specific information on this, and many people are very, very afraid of death. What we don't know, we fear. So in this episode, we're going to address what happens after we die. We'll debunk some myths to reduce the fear of dying, and we'll provide context for what's an inevitable part of the human experience. And after the discussion, we get to the most important part. The group frequency calibration associated with this episode is where the frequency work happens and where change actually occurs. So definitely listen to that. Without releasing distortion patterns targeted by the GFC, the change you want will be more difficult to attain because you haven't addressed the root of the issue. If you know somebody who needs to hear this, please share it with them. My name is Karen Cheong, and today in Mastering Your World Through Frequencies, we're talking about what happens after we die.
Okay, so this is a super interesting topic because like what happens after death assumes that we're going to have a discussion and you're going to talk about what happens after death and you're going to tell us. Mm-hmm. But there are so many people that talk about having near-death experiences and what happens. Mm-hmm. I mean, Anita Moorjani is a super famous lady that...
Totally.
I mean, it's an incredible story.
Yeah.
And she has scientific papers and documents to back up her story. Mm-hmm. So it's credible, right? But you're going to tell us your experience and what you've seen of what happens when you die.
Yeah.
Okay, go.
Okay, so the reason I know about this is there's a number. So first of all, when my father passed away, he took me through a near-death experience. So meaning he took me through the death process with him as far as he could take me. So I went through that with him, and he was lucky because he had an awakened death. So meaning before he died, a second before he died, he awoke. So he came into an awakened state. And so he took me through that death process. And he very specifically, and of course he's dead at this time, so this is on the etheric realm, and there was a transfer of knowledge, and he very specifically took me through the process so that I would understand what the steps were, so that I would be able to share it. So it was a very intentional thing on his part. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah. There's a couple of things in there. It would be really nice to kind of tease out a little bit. So he awakened.
Yes.
What does that mean?
So just before he died physically, he had the knowingness that he was infinite, indestructible consciousness, not intellectually, but he knew it, like completely in every cell of his body.
Yeah.
And he moved into that vibrational state of like, I am part of everything, everything is part of me. So this is not like an intellectual understanding, it's a full-on knowingness. And it happened just before he died.
And were you there for that?
I was not physically with him. I was there like a couple minutes later. My mom was with him, but I knew when it was happening because I was driving to the hospital, and for some reason I wasn't rushing. Okay, because my mother was like, she kept calling me saying, he's leaving. You need to come now. And I was like, I'm on my way. But what happened for me is, I was in the car driving, and he showed up next to me.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, and he's just left. Like I knew because he was like, and he's here, so he's not there in his body. Yeah. So for me, I knew it had happened. So so he took me through that experience specifically because he wanted me to not be afraid when I did it, and he wanted me to share it with others so they would not be afraid.
Okay, so this is the other part I'd love to have teased out. The experience. He took you through the experience.
Yeah.
So it sounds like there's stages or there's steps, or there was moments that you experienced the same process as him.
Yes.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah, for sure. So, and now I'm just going to preface this by saying he was awake before he died. And the reason I'm prefacing this is because everyone assumes that when we die, we move into the light. You know, there's this like thing, like we like ascend, you know, in some way. Or I suppose depending on the religious tradition you're from, you might go to hell, or you might go to purgatory, or you might reincarnate. But like there's some, you know what I mean? Like there's this like strange, like murky, I don't know exactly what happens, but generally when we die, we go to the light, right? Or something like this. Yeah. Or we hope to. That's actually not true. What happens, and I say this because I've helped thousands and thousands of people cross over. So meaning people who have just died, help them move into that pure source energy that they're trying to move into. I've helped people who have died many centuries ago, who are stuck in the earth realm. I've moved them. I've helped people who have generationally been in other people's bodies and crossed them over. There's many different ways and things that happen when you move into that field of pure source energy. It's not like automatic, is my point.
I'm just imagining the people that are listening to this, and I'm imagining that, hearing that there are dead people can be in your body or in your field is going to freak a few people out.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But you've helped them move on. Okay, so there's a process.
Yeah.
Clearly.
Yeah.
And this is what your dad taught you?
Yeah. And yes. And so the process he taught me was from, again, like I said, he happened to awaken before he died. And so I want to just mention this because it's a very key point. If you awaken before you die, okay, which means to me to become aware that you are infinite, indestructible consciousness, integral to the one, not intellectually, like without a shadow of a doubt, that truth is everything and you are it. When that happens, you have choice when you die, okay? As opposed to people who are not awakened before they die, they end up in like a death process that doesn't have as much choice, which means that set by how high your frequency resonance is. So what you experience in that death process depends on the frequency resonance that you were before you died. Ooh. I know. It's a big one. All right, ask your question.
Yeah, I'm just imagining the people watching it. Well, so there could be people watching that think their frequency is high. So how do they know that, they're going to have that experience in death, that, they're going to awaken, or are they awakened now? And am I going to... This conversation could create a lot of fear.
Yes, for sure.
So let's get through
the fear.
The fear and then the process.
Okay.
Shall we? Shall we do it that way?
Yeah. Okay. So let me just map it out so people don't have to be afraid. Okay. So let's just say that your frequency resonance isn't very high. Okay. So meaning if you're listening to this, chances are your frequency resonance is a little higher because you care about this kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're not just sitting on your couch thinking that like everything is just the physical reality and that's it. Like that's not you as a person. You're curious. You want to find out more about the mysteries. You want to do something to help yourself awaken. Okay. So let me just put that out there.
Yeah.
So when you have people who are asleep in the sense that they only think of themselves as human, they think of themselves as physical, as finite, as fundamentally disconnected from the divine and from what I would call their higher self even. When you're in that state, your resonance tends to be lower, right? Because you believe the illusion.
Right.
All right. So when people who have a lower resonance die, what happens is they go into like what I call the death process. So meaning you're not awake. Yes, you don't have that realization that you're infinite indestructible consciousness. What can happen is, depending on your frequency resonance, is if it isn't very high and if your death is sudden, right? Like you get hit by a truck, someone kills you, you die of a disease really quickly and you don't really have time to process it, you fall off a balcony, whatever, okay?
Yeah.
Something happens and you die suddenly. There is a realm where it's like it's not very removed from the human experience.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
So that's what we call ghosts. You know, where you see them? Okay? You like, people are like, whoa, I just felt a cold breeze. Or like, you literally feel someone brushing against you. That's a very physical thing. Like if something actually, you feel it do this over your skin, that's a very dense experience because you physically can feel them. That means that the vibrational level of that thing, okay, which is a dead person, is actually quite low.
Yes.
It's close to the human realm.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you're in that ghost state, it's actually not delightful.
No.
Okay? Because you're very confused. You're just like, because you're still associated with the human realm.
Yeah.
Right? You still think that this is the game. Right? You think, okay, well, it's about the physical. You're like, okay, and you're confused as to why people are in your house and they can't hear you. You're confused why they keep moving stuff around. You're like, why is that happening?
Yeah.
You know, or why they can't hear you. You know, so you're in this kind of, it is kind of like a purgatory because you don't even really quite realize that you're dead. I know it sounds weird, like how is a dead person not even freaking know they're dead? You'd be surprised how many dead people don't quite realize that they are dead.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's that. Right? That's sort of like the worst case scenario. And just think about this. How many years you can be stuck thinking that this physical reality is still the game, you know? That's a very frustrating
horrible, kind of a lonely experience, right?
Yeah.
Until someone says to you, hey, you're dead. And you're like, whoa, what? I'm dead? Now, all of a sudden, when you have the realization that you're dead, you can actually move up in the death process, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's imagine now that you've moved up in the death process. Okay.
So we're in an elevator. That's lower. That's ground level.
That's ground level.
Right. This is after death.
This is after death.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's just imagine now that you're someone who's a little bit higher in your resonance. Okay. So now.
So this is a new person.
This is a new person. Okay. So now we're a different dead person.
Yeah.
And they're higher in their resonance.
Yes.
So they recognize that when they die, that they are dying, that they're dead. Okay. So they have the death process. Okay. So what will happen for some of you is that so if you are like this type of person, there's a physical sort of experience that can happen. You'll start to hear almost like a mechanical like whooshing that can happen, because that's when you start to disassociate from the physical body.
Right.
Okay. You'll start to feel yourself some of you will start to feel yourself being pulled up. Some of you will start to feel like you're being pulled up, and then some of you will start to experience more like a light. You know, everyone talks about this tunnel of light. It's weird. It kind of is kind of like a tunnel. I mean, it's like it kind of feels like a tunnel of light a little bit. You might hear chattering around you, like a lot of different chattering. Now, depending on your frequency resonance, your experience of that upward movement will change. Okay, so you'll hear the chattering. Some of you will like see people who have died before you.
Yes.
You'll see them kind of come around. Some of them are like trying to help you. They're just like, you're dead. It's okay.
Yeah.
We're here. Don't worry. It's going to be fine. You know, so it's like good, lovely actually, because they're just trying to help you relax basically. So you may have that. Now, depending on, like I said, where your frequency resonance is, you'll sort of come to like a resting point, okay, where you'll, there's different kinds of dead and what you choose. So remember, you have free will. So depending on who you are as a dead person, you might stay at a certain level. You might choose to be like, okay, you know what? I actually feel, because you have been someone who was seeking in your physical life, I feel like there's something else that I want to experience. Various dead who are starting to like elevate, even though they're in that death realm.
Yeah.
Where they're still moving towards that pure source energy. They're still moving towards awakening, so to speak.
Right.
Where they have that experience of that oneness feeling, of that infinite indestructible consciousness. They don't have, I mean, it sounds weird, like they're out of their bodies. Don't they know that?
I was going to ask you that. So are we saying that there is, like, even after death, that pure source is in there still after death?
It's like they don't have the full realization how much they are part of the one.
Right.
That's the missing thing. They understand they're not in a body. They're like, okay, check. Body, not there.
Yeah.
But they're still moving into that oneness state. They haven't quite raised their, I know it sounds weird because they're dead. And when we think of dead people, we're thinking, okay, they're out of their bodies. So obviously, I mean, hello, awakening.
They've gone to heaven, haven't
yeah,
they?
I mean, haven't they awoken? I mean, hello, right? No, they haven't quite gotten enough, like, of speed, let's call it, in their vibration to experience themselves as infinite, indestructible consciousness. And they haven't quite gotten to that place where they feel that oneness. They haven't quite gotten there. They're moving towards it.
Right.
And so there are some dead who I call like the dead who are awakening, right? They're moving into that awakened state where I have moved. It doesn't take much, but you're just like, all you need is a little extra bump in your resonance. And they do it, and it's like, whoom, then they're like moved into that field of that infinite. I can feel it. It's really amazing. It's like their fields just go, fwah, right? Because they recognize the infiniteness that they are. And they're like, oh, thank God. And then they can move into that field of the infinite, into that pure source energy.
So once that's happened, once you felt that expansion and they've moved into pure source, what happens to them? Because isn't there reincarnation somewhere in there?
Yeah. So when you have an awakened dead person, okay, whether it's like at that moment where they've been working towards it and then they achieve it, or if it's in their body before they die, people have choice. Those beings have choice. So they can move into that field of the infinite.
Yeah.
They can stay in the realm, like where they help beings who are alive, like in bodies.
Right.
They can help beings that are not in bodies. Like they have a lot of choice, right, in terms of how they want to be, how they want to serve. They can also choose reincarnation in the sense of what kind of reincarnation they experience. And you might be saying to yourself, well, I don't know what that means because don't we, like, how the hell does reincarnation fit?
Yeah. Yeah, and like, how can you possibly know what you're going to experience? Because there's so many factors that are going to affect your human existence.
Totally.
Right?
But as an awakened being, you get to choose the lessons you wish to learn.
Oh,
Okay.
Right. Okay.
So you can choose the resonance of the family that you're going to be born into, and the lineage, and what lessons you wish to learn. You also can choose how much remembering you have.
I was just going to say, how does that work for, let's say, okay, wait, I'm having a bit of a scrambling of a mind here.
Yeah, go for it.
Because I'm imagining I have awakened.
Yeah.
I realize that I'm infinite, indestructible consciousness.
Yep.
And part of the one.
Yeah.
Why do I need to come back and have another lesson?
Well, you don't. It's really just because you feel like you want to. So that's what I'm saying. It's optional.
Okay.
You're just like, okay, maybe in like 100 years, I'll come back and experience the body. And when I come back in the body, I'm going to learn these things.
Right. And so when I come back into that body, what happens if, like, here I am, I'm awakened, and I move into a family that are full of unawakened beings?
Yeah.
So that's a choice that I make?
Yeah, you
you're
can
saying?
make that choice if you want to experience that. You also get to choose how much remembering you have.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Because a lot of beings who have come into that awakened state, when they reincarnate again for, pleasure, let's just call it that, or learning, it really is because they want to experience something specific. So they'll actually have certain rememberings.
Okay.
It's like they won't completely forget in the reincarnation process this whole thing that they know, which is that they are infinite indestructible consciousness. Make sense? It's kind of like a refinement of like, okay, I remember all that and I get to have the pleasure of the physical body. All right, now what can I experience as a physically embodied consciousness?
Sure.
What is that like?
That's the multiplicity of that is humongous. My
Yes.
little brain is going to get and also, like, there's millions of questions rolling around in my head. So we've had the reincarnation topic covered a little bit,
A little bit.
because it's huge. I get that, right? So, but what about the being that chooses just to assimilate or move into the pure source, and then also the other question? I'm sorry, I'm kind of jumping a bit here, but dimensions.
Yeah.
Where does that fit in? Is pure source dimensional? I mean, there's talk of like 4th, 5th, 6th, 9th dimensional beings.
Yeah.
Where's pure source and all of that as well,
Right. So what you're calling out is my shorthand. So when you move into this experience of you as infinite indestructible consciousness, right, moving into this field of pure source energy, you actually move more back into your natural state. So the dimensional, meaning that you as a being are aware more of what's happening. Like, it's almost like the veils part, right? So you're aware of like yourself at the different dimensional orders. So meaning, maybe backing up. Okay. So there are different dimensional orders of consciousness, which simply have to do with vibrational rate. Okay?
Yeah.
So you are individuated consciousness, meaning you are an aspect of pure source that is individuated, meaning it knows that it's separate. Okay. It chooses to have an experience. Okay. And what will happen is, and I don't know everything, so I'm not claiming that I do.
Yeah.
But from what I understand, beings will sit, like sort of rest at certain dimensional orders.
Right.
Okay? 4th, 5th, whatever. And in those dimensional orders, there's a continuation of the growth towards moving fully back into the one.
Right.
Okay? Back into pure source. Okay. So at these different dimensional orders, there's different knowingnesses. Right? Because your awareness at the 4th dimensional is different than what you will know at the 3rd, clearly. 5th, different than 4th. 6th, different than 5th, right? Like every dimension you go up, it's like massive in terms of consciousness.
Yeah.
Okay. So what happens when we die and you're awake, you recognize, does that make sense? That you are part of the being that created the embodied experience.
Right.
Okay? At the dimensional order at which you exist, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, whatever the heck it is for you.
Yeah.
And then you sort of like come back into like that bigger, remember, you're just an aspect of that consciousness seated at a dimensional order. So people are like, what is she talking about, for God's sake? Okay, I know this is a bit of a stretch. This is an advanced topic. But when you are an advanced or a higher dimensional order being, you can project an aspect of your consciousness to have an embodied experience. Just like if you and I are sitting here right now, if we close our eyes and just imagine that you can imagine yourself expanding your awareness out to the very edge of your field, meaning what you can feel. You can actually imagine yourself feeling the edges of the universes, right? You can project your consciousness right here in your little human body. So just imagine at a much higher dimensional order, you're the bigger aspect of you can project an aspect of its consciousness into having an embodied experience, which you think is you.
Yeah.
So now when you, let's say, physically die and you move into that awake state, you move back into that knowingness of you at that higher dimensional order. So you have a lot of choice.
Yeah.
How are you going to choose to have this, you know what I mean? You kind of like reunite with the like larger aspect of you, I guess that's what you could call it.
Yeah.
And then, you know, this projection of whatever you want to experience from that consciousness level.
So the way you describe it, it sounds like there are stages to this.
Yep.
And that you move up in dimensional frequency resonance. I don't know what to call it, because I mean, this is like you said, this is an advanced topic. How can we possibly talk about something that in this human existence right now we're not experiencing? Right?
Yeah.
But it sounds like there's stages, and there sounds like there's points at which you might stay at a dimensional level until you've projected your consciousness into so many experiences that you suddenly say, okay, right, now I'm done with that. And then you get to a point where you're like, I'm done with the whole projection of my consciousness now. I'm ready to return home. What happens then?
Yeah. So it's more like, from what I've experienced, I'm not saying I know everything. Okay. So as you said, we are still having a human experience. So this is from what I've felt, and this is based on my current frequency resonance as we're talking right now. So please know this. And so what I would say is my experience, or what I've been shown so far, it's not like you get tired of it. It's more like you start to celebrate like the growing and the learning and all this sort of stuff. It's fun.
Right.
I know it doesn't sound like fun because we're having the human experience. You're like, this kind of just sucks. But really, is when you start to elevate into these higher dimensional orders, it's just kind of fun because you're exploring and you're growing and you get to see what life is. And you know what I mean? It's like, it's different. Like how we feel about it is different because our consciousness level is so high. It's really hard for us as humans to understand that because we have thoughts and emotions and we think we're going to die, or we know we're going to die, but we're not sure what happens after that, which is hence this conversation, all this stuff. But at that level, you are infinite. You know what you are.
Yeah.
And so what happens is, from what I've understood, is that you become, first of all, you're not embodied in the same way. You start to not have gender in the same way, where it's like masculine, feminine, and it becomes more and more like unity. And so you start to have more and more of an experience that we as humans would consider almost godlike. We can't even begin to understand it. Like we can't in our little minds, you know? And you merge into the one, like you become at that same resonance so that you come back in, from what I understand. Now what happens after that, I mean, I don't know, I don't remember, you know? Anyway, I'm curious to find out.
Yeah, I mean, how else would you be able to answer it? Really, like when I think about it, it's like, well, you know, unless we die, we're done doing what we're doing. We're never really going to know, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so then let's come back to what your dad, the process that he showed you.
Yeah.
Are you happy to share that?
Yeah, for sure. And before I get there, I'm just going to talk about reincarnation for just a minute. Okay, so what I want to say is that you will reincarnate. Okay, and you will reincarnate into the same level of resonance that you left.
Right, so you never drop.
Right.
Right, that's why I was asking that question. Okay, if you have this awakened death and then you choose to move into a human existence where none of your family are awakened.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. I
sucks.
can't even imagine that. But you're saying that you would maintain that level of resonance that you had the awakened death on.
Yes.
So maybe that's just me, happy end, and maybe you're the one that's going to awaken the family.
Yes,
right?
exactly. Okay. So just because the family looks like mess when you begin, and you might not imagine that they are actually the ones having a child that is awakened.
Yeah.
Who knows what is going to be catalyzed out of that, right? So we don't know. But what I would say is that even if you don't awaken, you'll move laterally. So let's imagine like you're at this level of like, I don't know, your resonance 28. It's not like this, but let's just imagine, okay, for the sake of conversation. When you reincarnate, you'll be at 28.
Yes.
So meaning that that means that the same distortions that you have dealt with in this past life that are not resolved, you're going to deal with again.
Yay!
So that's why some of the lifetimes are really repetitive.
Yeah.
Because even though it looks different, right? So it's a different timeline, it's a different set of family, it's whatever, but it's still at the core the same distortion patterns. Yeah. Because really all of this human drama and experience and et cetera, it's here to teach you something.
Yeah.
Okay, because you as a being, whether you or not you remember it, is moving towards remembering who you truly are. You're moving towards awakening. Even if you don't think it's important to you, you know what I mean, this lifetime, again, you'll be presented with it as an opportunity the next lifetime.
Yeah.
So you're just going to keep kind of recycling in the same distortion, in the same frequency resonance, until you release them, however that you do that in that particular lifetime, and you move up in your resonance. Okay.
Right.
And then you have a different set point in terms of free frequency resonance. Now, for some of you, you have had many lifetimes where you've been seeking, in different kinds of spiritual traditions and different kinds of mystical sets. Some of you have, intertwined with the being that was known as the Christ, and some of you with the Buddha and whatever, and some of you both, and whatever the thingy is for you. Really, it doesn't matter. So my point is that for people who are seeking, they don't even know what they're freaking seeking. They just know that they're trying to remember something desperately or have this connection that they know that they have, but they don't know how to verbalize it or find it or feel it. Chances are you've been doing this lifetime after lifetime. Like, rarely do I work with somebody where I'm like, oh, bingo, this is the first lifetime you've been seeking. It's very unusual. Most people who've been seeking have been doing it over lifetimes. And so what happens is your resonance keeps jumping. And for those of you at this point in time who have been seeking, this is why we keep talking about it as such an amazing time, because this is one of these points in time where you get to finally, after all these freaking lifetimes, move up into the consciousness level that you've been desperately trying to get into for all these lifetimes and incarnations on the earth.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now is the time, like you've been saying for a while now, just use the momentum of this.
Yeah.
Like, let's get rid of these distortion bonds, because aren't we sick of reincarnating with the
Yeah,
same,
exactly.
the same handbag and the same shoes?
Exactly.
A new pair of shoes and a new handbag.
Exactly. You want something different. And exactly. So we have the opportunity in this lifetime to resolve a lot of that stuff so you can have awakening. By the way, you don't have to have awakening just before you die. I mean, you can have awakening like tomorrow. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
let's just talk about that a little bit, just a little bit, because awakening isn't an on-off switch.
Right.
Right? It's not the go to bed at nighttime and wake up in the morning, tra-la-la, I'm awake. Let's just maybe tease that out a little bit, what you mean by that.
Yeah.
That awakening can happen at any time. What does that mean?
So your first inkling of awakening is when you start to have a realization or a feeling or an awareness of what I call your big S self. This is you as infinite indestructible consciousness.
Right.
So meaning you have that sense of expansion, you have that sense of love, whatever it is for you. I'm not trying to dictate your experience. But when you recognize that you're something bigger, and then you can see or imagine or be aware of or feel your humanness. Okay?
Right.
That it's not the end all be all.
Right. So in another way to put that as well could be that you are no longer trapped by your mind's programming.
Yes.
Cultural lineage, that you actually can understand that there's more than that your mind's telling you.
Yes.
There is another aspect to this.
Yes,
Right,
exactly.
okay.
So that's the beginning process. And like you said, it's a spectrum. So that's the beginning. And then, of course, awakening is infinite, right? It's like just
Sounds like it.
Yeah, exactly. It's just about rising in your consciousness, vibrational level, and experiencing different things as a result of it.
Okay, so, I mean, we've explained that, but I know that we started talking about your dad
Yes.
in the process, and I know
coming
there's
back.
probably people that will want to know what happened, Karen.
Yes, totally. So with my dad, the very first thing is that what he showed me was his freedom. So meaning, when he died, he was, I think, 82 or 83, something around, I'm not very good at age, but around there. And he was in a lot of pain. So his body was very hunched over and he couldn't move very well. And the first thing he showed me was his freedom. So meaning he was doing backflips and he appeared as like someone when he was in his 30s, which, by the way, I was not born, I never saw my father in his 30s because he had me older. Like he was like 40 when I was born.
Right.
So I saw like a being showing me like his spirit age of like in the 30s, which is kind of fascinating to me. And he was doing backflips and the feeling of him was pure joy.
Yeah.
Okay. Just unbelievable joy and the freedom. Like it was just like absolute freedom. And then what was cool was he then showed me a number of things. So one, and it wasn't exactly like a linear thing. It was kind of almost like vignettes or like things that he was showing me.
Mm-hmm.
So the next thing is that all of a sudden we're hovering over his body. So I'm looking down at my father's body in the hospital. Okay. And I can feel the being that's my father next to me. So I can feel him very clearly next to me. So I can see the body, I see the hospital bed, I see the room, like I see all of it. Like it's extremely clear. And we're hovering at a very specific height above his body. And what's amazing is then, because it was multiple perspectives, okay? Because it's not like it's one thing when you're in that state.
Yep.
So at the same time as we're looking down, it's almost like I was standing like laterally far away from him. Like I'm standing like looking across the room. Okay?
So you're getting lots of perspectives
At the same time. And what I see is, and what he's showing me is that there is this moment where he showed me when that light, that, you know, when the lifting up.
Yeah.
So I saw this, like the thing that animates the body, the spirit, whatever you want to call it, higher self, whatever, leave. So it left out of it, like his heart space opened, and the being that is him left through the heart space. So I saw it from multiple perspectives, right? So there's my dad and me looking down his body. I see that happen. And at the same time, I have this experience of his feeling as a being, not like the man who was my father, having what it is. It was really beautiful because it was tremendous gratitude for the physicalness of his life, of the body, and it was like a thankfulness of the experience. That he also knew that he was going to forget.
Right.
You know, so it's the weirdest thing. It's hard to convey in words. So there's. And it sounds sad. For me, it was sad, right? Because I'm his daughter and I'm still in my body alive.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's my filter because I was like aware that this being is about to forget. But it wasn't sad for the being. Make sense?
Yeah.
Like all the details, like I could feel him like being like starting to pull away from the physicalness that was him.
Yeah.
So I knew he was forgetting, but there was no sadness in him. You know, it's just a tremendous, like the closest emotion that we have for it is gratitude.
Yes.
And I, of course, was crying in my physical body because it was so beautiful. You know, this, like, we don't really, I have not experienced that kind of emotion, you know? And then the perspective changed. And then he was taking me through that tunnely thing, right?
Yeah.
So, like I said, it's not sequential. It wasn't like I was, and, you know, and then this happened, and then that happened. So I could feel that, and I could feel like that whirring sound. Like I could feel, like, you know what I mean? And I could feel that whoom up that tunneling thing. And then I emerged into this field of this very, very, very blue. Okay, in this blueness. And it was unbelievable because it was just this expansive blueness. And this is going to sound totally weird, but it's like in that blueness, I could feel everything being created, right? So it was a feeling, but of like, you know, like all the stars and all the planets and all the everything. I was like, you know, I could feel everything being created and dying and all that sort of stuff. Like, it was all happening at the same time.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa. And then it changed, okay? And we were sitting in what seemed like, it's going to sound so dumb, but like, it's almost like we were sitting on a front porch, you know, in like rocking chairs. Yeah. And it was like we were sipping lemonade. It was like, you know, like having lemonade on like a hot day. It was like that languid, you know, there was no rush. We were just like sitting, there's like a lot of time. And we're sitting together. So he and I are sitting in these let's imagine, chairs. And these, we were watching, and I was like, what are we looking at? And we were watching what looked like spheres, like kind of like float by. And I was like, what are those?
Yeah.
But I knew that we were watching them, but I didn't know what they were. And I realized that what I was watching were like memories, like periods of like timestamps, really. And he was he was watching them.
Yes.
You know, it was like the parade of these memories. And what was amazing was, it was like the feeling, if you've ever been a book lover and you've read a book and you love the book and you've read it many times, but every time you read it, it's kind of beautiful in its own way, but there's a familiarity with it, and a love for it and all that. So imagine that, but like times 100.
Yeah.
Or 1,000, because what he was looking at was his life.
Yeah.
And I couldn't see them because it wasn't my memories. It was his memories. So I wasn't permitted, do you know what I mean? Like I don't have visibility into those spheres. They're not mine. But the feeling of them was like he was appreciating them a last time before he let them go. But it wasn't sad. You know, like in your humanness, you'd be like, it's like, for me, I feel emotional and sad right now. But for him, it wasn't. So just to be really clear, there was no sadness. For him, it was just like, I got to have this experience.
Yeah.
I also want to say, like, you know, a lot of people will have regret in their humanness. But as that being having that experience, there was no regret. Everything was perfect as it was. There was nothing, no need to change it. Do you know what I mean? Like, we have this idea that there's regret, or I wish I would have. That didn't exist.
Yeah.
It was just gratitude for the experience. And, but it's strange, you know, as a human, like, being with him, because I had grief.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I had the sadness of knowing that he was letting go of the memories.
Yeah.
Because I was in some of those memories.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, so after that experience, what happened is it changed again. So it changed into, again, he reminded me, it's like he pulled me aside and was like, remember this. Do you know, he was like very intentional. And then it got to a point where I told you about that blue light.
Yeah.
Where he took me back to it again, just so that I could be like, he's like, I could feel the creation and everythingness, you know? And then he disappeared. And I knew at that moment I couldn't follow him where he was going.
Ah, okay.
Like, that was like the ceiling.
Yeah, that was as far as he could take you at that time.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And so when you came up, like when you woke up from that, because it was a dream, well, it wasn't a dream.
It was meditation,
you know, meditation. When you came out of that meditation, did your life change after that? Like, did you start to notice things that were different, or?
Yeah. Well, for me, what it was is that because that happened right at the time of his death, he also gifted me with grace. So meaning I could feel the beauty of life.
Right.
I could feel the sacredness of life. And I think as humans, it's hard to understand because we get so caught up in like, you know, I've got to like make dinner. I've got to like write this email. I've got to, you know, all this stuff, right? Buy groceries and do the things. But in that moment, I really, for a few days after that, I really felt the beauty of everything, you know, and like the fragility of life.
Yes.
And the getting to have it, you know, and that was a really beautiful thing. And also I was lucky because, and this has happened when I've given sessions to people before, and I didn't understand it at the time. But when he passed away, when he moved into that state where he was beyond where I could go, you know, where I told you, like, I can't, he was like, that's all I can take you to.
Yes.
At that point, because he was awake, he did something really tremendous, which he cleared a ton of distortion from me. Like lineage distortion, like things that we held in, like lineage, cultural stuff. He just was like, like he just took them. And I remember the feeling of him saying, you know, we could do this and I could have done this in my lifetime, but I didn't know that I could.
Yes.
So I had to wait till now. But what he was trying to tell me without telling me is, so can you.
So you can do it, yeah.
Yeah. And we all can. I'm not saying that it's like a special moment. Like, it was a special moment for me personally, but I'm not saying it was like
you
just
are
for
unique.
me. Yeah, exactly. Like, I'm not some unique being. We all can.
Yeah.
And that was part of what he was trying to impart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so at the end of all this discussion, you know what I'm going to ask you.
Okay. What's the GFC on?
What's the GFC on? Wow.
Yeah, I know.
There's so much in there.
Yeah.
I mean, it feels like you should have a part 2, but you know.
Yeah. So I feel for the GFC, we have so much fear and resistance of death.
Yeah.
It's terrifying for us.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's pretty fundamental, right? And part of the reason that we're sharing this right now is to help people who are afraid of dying.
Yeah.
Because a lot of us, and we resist what we don't know. We're just like, oh God, right? Like, it's some scary ass thing. It's not like we're super prepared for it. I mean, honestly, we're not prepared for it in our culture at all. And so part of what the sharing is for people to understand a little bit what it is, so they're not afraid. You know what I mean? Like, it's not so scary. And also in the GFC, which is the thing that's important, is that now some people have many, many layers of resistance and fear of death. And to begin to release that fear and that resistance, because it's really heavy.
Yeah.
And so that you can move with more ease in your life, you know, and so that we're all going to die, and to help ease that fear. So that's what the GFC is going to be on.
That sounds wonderful. And thank you for sharing that very precious story of you and your dad. I know that that's very personal and very precious. So I appreciate it, and I'm sure that other people do too.
So for those of you who would like to release some of the resistance and the fear that you have of death, then I highly recommend listening to the group frequency calibration that's associated with this episode. And if you know someone that this can help, please share it with them.
We're about to start the group frequency calibration, or GFC, where we actually do the frequency work and where change is catalyzed. To get to the GFC, click on the square that'll appear to the right, or the link in the description below. It's time to bring in a new experience, a new consciousness, and a new world. Let's rise together.